Hello, church. Welcome to this week's message. My name is Henry Loke. This is God's Feeding Station. It's a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be with you again this week. I want to thank everybody, and I don't do this enough, but just want to thank everybody for being here because you have a lot of options. When it comes to online stuff, there's a lot of options out there, and you choose to be here. And so I really thank you a lot from the bottom of my heart, and appreciate your willingness to be here and your support and all your prayers, your monetary support for those who donate. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart. So we finished up last week the terms of the lease. And rather than try to start something new before the end of the year, was praying about it. And we're going to do some topical stuff now that we're into that holiday season that can be very stressful, can bring somebody anxiety, depression. We want to talk about some things topical, and we'll talk about some things from a Thanksgiving perspective. We'll talk about some things from a Christmas perspective. And so we'll do that, and then at the first of the year, we'll start our new series, whatever God determines that to be. I have an idea, but I'm not quite sure yet. I'm not sure if it's my idea or his idea. So we're going to continue to pray about that. Would appreciate if you would pray about that, and so that I would get a clear direction from God on which way he wants to go. So we are going to talk about some Thanksgiving things over the next 3 weeks. Today we're in Psalm 147, 7 through 11, and the title today is Sing to the Lord with Thanksgiving. It's taken from our first verse today, verse 7, sing to the Lord with thanksgiving, make melody to our God on the lyre. We know that the Psalms were sung with accompaniment, and a lot of times that was on the lyre. And so a couple of examples I have written down here. We've had some really, I was privileged and honored to be called into leading worship at New Day when we were up there at the church here in Boulder. It was a humbling experience. It could be a nerve-wracking experience because when you are in music and you do music from a worldly perspective, there's a lot of ego involved, and you're drawing attention, and you're trying to do a good job, and trying to have your peers and others look favorably upon you. And when it comes to doing worship in church, worship about God, it is about God. It's not about you. And it took me a while to get past that. But it was a great humbling experience, I shouldn't say humbling experience. It was a lesson in humility and a very welcome one. And so it was awesome to do that. And we've been to some worship shows, Christian concerts up at Red Rocks. And those I've talked about before, those are very heartening. They're very encouraging because you can feel sometimes isolated in your faith. And it was great to go up there and have thousands of people worshiping for hours on end, nonstop. I mean, the last show we were up there, even in 40-degree weather and rain, it was a Chris Tomlin show. And it was miserable from a weather perspective, but it was awesome from a worship perspective because nobody went anywhere for 2 hours. We froze and it was cold, but everybody stayed and worshiped God, and it was awesome. I've had these moments of anxiety that I've talked about before, and I've had God speak to me through songs that would come on the radio or songs that I've had, just in my ears on my iPod or whatever. And it would turn into worship and just thanksgiving that he would show up in those times. And we've all had those moments where we've had a song, whether it's been in church, whether it's been on the radio, just speak to our hearts. And we've been lifted up in the spirit in worship, in praise and thanksgiving to God. And those are awesome experiences. I've had issues with worship nowadays. Excuse me, been to a couple of services, and I saw something from New York the other day. I guess it was at the marathon. And it all looks the same now. It all looks the same. And I have an issue with that kind of concert setting thing in churches. And maybe it's just I'm getting old and cranky, who knows. But it's different now, and it seems to be more of a show now. And I'm not judging anybody. I'm saying I just have issue with that, because I can watch various services from different churches and the worship all looks the same. The staging all looks the same. And being out of that circle for about 3 years now, and being almost 4, and not ever having been involved in a mega church, because those are where I typically see this. Again, not judging the hearts, that could be the thing now. But I'm kind of, and those who, when we did the Song of the Week, which might be making its comeback here, we'll talk about that later, but I tend to lean more towards the hymns and stuff because they are more meaningful to me. They're more biblical to me, more solid scripturally to me. And so, regardless of all of this, we're called to sing praises and lift up songs of praise to God. We've all had those moments of pure joy singing out to God in praise. I remember, I won't give you her last name, but Mary, who used to go to church up with us up at New Day, she was kind of and she's I need to put her on staff here at the feeding station too, because when things aren't working right, I usually get a text or something from her. So I need to put her on staff as my quality assurance person here at the feeding station. But Mary would be a good gauge for me when I was doing worship, because that was a gal who worshiped from her heart. And I knew that when we were speaking praise and worship and thanksgiving in our song, I could tell by her, because she's a woman who just worships from her heart and really knows God and really appreciates God, really loves God. And so she was my gauge. I would watch her reactions. But we've all had those moments. And so we should have those moments. We should have those moments a lot, because God has chosen us. The Bible tells us that. God has chosen us, and now we have chosen him. And we are in a covenant relationship with him. We've chosen him, and we know him better because he has shown himself to us through his Son. And as I said, we're in a covenant relationship with him, and he shows up constantly for us and reveals more of himself to us in his word. And so that relationship is destined to last forever. And so for all of those things, we sing praise and thanksgiving to God. Verses 8 and 9, he covers the heavens with clouds, and he prepares rain for the earth. He makes grass grow on the hills. He gives to the beasts their food, and to the young ravens that cry. This is the great, awesome thing, and creation continues to overwhelm me when I think about it and see how it works. How it works just in concert with itself. God did creation. He created creation. He created the world. He created the universe to work with itself, to provide for itself and those in it. Right? Look how rain happens. Now I'm not the scientist. I failed biology my sophomore year, had to go to summer school. So, but the Reader's Digest version is heat from the sun turns water from plants and leaves and rivers and oceans and streams. It turns it into vapor, and the vapor rises into the air, and it starts to collect. As it collects, clouds form, and the droplets of water that it turns into combine, they become heavy. When it becomes too heavy, too big, it rains. Right? Falls on the fields where crops can grow, falls in the mountains where meadows and streams are fed, so that as things come downhill, we have it to use for our needs. And so there's this evolution that takes place. And science has proven it. And that once that rain falls and does its thing, the process starts all over again. And so, like I said, it rains in the fields, it waters the fields so crops can grow, falls on the mountains, meadows grow, animals are fed, streams are fed, lakes are fed. We get water that comes down from the mountains. We always talk about the snowpack here in Boulder. How high is it? Because that provides water for us in the spring and summer months when if it doesn't rain all that much. It's just this awesome cycle that happens, and that how it works, how God designed it to provide for us. And that's who God is. God is the provider. He's not just a provider for man, though. He's a provider for all his creation. Jesus talked about it in Matthew 6:28 and 29. He says, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. And in those clouds and in those rainy days and snowy days and stuff here in Colorado, it's kind of entering into that season now. It's kind of a picture of the pattern of life sometimes too, isn't it? When we're afflicted, when we're chastened, when we're in those times, and they're bleak times, and they can be like rainy days, really dark and dreary, bleak times. But as you know, those times serve a purpose, just like the rain serves a purpose. In those times, we have this tendency to turn to God a little bit more often, to get a little bit more serious about our prayer. And in those seemingly dark times, it's when growth happens. We're in the Word more. We're praying more. We're being fed on the Word more. We're being fed spiritually more. And then we grow. We grow in faith. We grow in reliance. And so those dark times, just like the rain is necessary for things to grow, those dark times in our lives are necessary for us to grow. And God will use those times to grow us in the Spirit so that we produce fruit for His kingdom. Hebrews 12:11 says, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. We've all been there. But later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So just like we need the rainy days, we need those times in our lives when we need to grow. Well, God provides for us. And then when we come out of it, we look back and go, man, look at how I've grown and look at the fruit we're producing now. So verses 10 and 11 in Psalm 147. His delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the legs of man. But the Lord takes pleasure in those who fear him, in those who hope in his steadfast love. Consider what man takes pride in. Look at what we consider to be worthy, right? Bigger, faster, stronger. We build gigantic skyscrapers as monuments to our ingenuity and our engineering prowess. And, you know, we live in the biggest houses we can afford. We like luxury cars. We like fast cars. We like the best athletes. Those are the ones who we admire. We wonder at the works of man, the Colosseum, cathedrals that we've built, things like the Sistine Chapel, great artworks, great, again, engineering, would seem like engineering miracles at times. Those are the things we admire. We build large armies. Countries build large armies, bigger tanks, faster planes, more destructive weapons. And we look to leaders who will lead with an iron fist, whom the world will fear because we think that's going to keep us safe. And God looks at all that and goes, nah, not so much. Not so much. Because have you ever seen the Avengers movies? Thanos, and 40% of the population is just gone? I mean, God is kind of like that. He could do that. Could snap his fingers and half or all of this could be gone. In fact, Revelation says he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. So those feats of man don't concern God. I mean, think about it. He cares for the littlest things as much as he cares for the strongest things in his creation. He cares for the lily of the field as much as he cares for the wild stallion. If you've ever seen herds of those run around, just magnificent creatures. So God takes no pleasure in our games that we play or we root for strictly for winning or losing, right? He has no fear of earthly power or prestige. He pays no mind to that. Physical skill, material gain, worldly power are of no concern to God. He's omnipotent. Those things that we sometimes or tend to value, they have no play in his kingdom. Can you think about it? If one nation's ruler at war with another were to pray like this, went to God and said, look, God, got a massive army. We've got the best, most technologically up-to-date, massive, powerful weapons man has ever seen. We deserve victory based on that. Grant us victory based on the technological achievements we've come to, and grant us this victory that we've earned by our own means. That'd fall on deaf ears, wouldn't it? Again, God's not interested in that. Psalm 27 says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's what God concerns himself with. Right? So you have that one prayer. Contrast that now to the prayer of Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles when he's facing the armies of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir. Here's what he says. O our God, will you not execute judgment on them? For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. So now you're talking. That's a prayer. God constantly went out before the armies of Israel in the Old Testament when they turned to him first. They tried to do it in their own strength. What happened? You saw that a lot of times. Get their butts kicked, right? We see that now. I mean, social media is ripe for this. You enter into battles and arguments on social media without consulting God first. We just jump in, bang it out on the keyboard, and then we wonder how we've gotten into this back and forth. And we wonder why when we get off then, social media after being on for an hour, we feel drained. Because we're entering into battles we're not called to. We're entering into battles we're not called to. Because how many hearts have we changed via social media? I would venture to guess not many. I'm sure some, but I would venture to guess not many. You'll change more face-to-face than you will by thumbing your device. Because you got to reach the heart. And you're going to do more to reach the hearts of men and women over a cup of coffee than you will sitting behind your computer. I should probably take my own advice. But that's what God is about. God is about the heart, right? Where are you spiritually? What's the status of your heart? When he sends Samuel to go find David to make him king, Samuel's going through all of David's brothers, and Samuel's like, man, look at this guy's like 6'4", 230, blonde hair, ripped. That's going to be the guy. What does God say? 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. That's the key. So many people that we dismiss based on appearance, God really cares for. Think about all those who were rejected by society that Jesus drew close to when he walked the earth. You could take a lesson from that. And it talks about fear and hope. See, those that fear God with awe and reverence and hope in his forgiveness and blessings, they do so because they know God. They know he's merciful. They know he's gracious. And those are the ones that God takes pleasure in because they're in a relationship with him. Why was Abraham called God's friend? Because he was in a relationship with God. He knew God. And hence, see, now I'm like double thinking, was it Abraham or Moses that was called the friend of God? Regardless, those two guys were in such a close relationship with God. They walked with him daily. They had reverent fear of him. They weren't afraid that he was going to wield his awesome power in an unjust way. I mean, you think about Moses and the golden calf. And God, after that whole episode, God says, you know what, I'm going to do the Thanos thing. I'm going to wipe them out. We'll start over. If Moses was fearful in the wrong way, he would have never stood between God and Israel. But he knew God, and he knew God was just, and he knew God was righteous. And so he stands up and says, no, God, you can't do this. If for no other reason, for your own reputation. The nations will say, you brought your people out to the desert just to kill them. So Moses had concern for God and his people, but because Moses knew God. Abraham knew God. He picked up everything and left and went to where God showed him to go because he trusted God. So as these great people of the Bible, we fear because we know we're sinners and we know God. But we hope because we know God and we know that he is merciful. We fear him because he's omnipotent, right? The Thanos thing. We hope because he is good and gracious. And so our fear sobers our hope, and our hope brightens our fear. And it puts that fear in its right place. Knowing that God is love and being reverent of him and of his power and of his might, but not afraid of it. So, knowing God, knowing all these things, understanding who he is and all he's done, brings us to this place, back to this place of thankfulness. When you look at how God has designed the world to work and how God provides through what he's created for all of us. I mean, if you ever grown a vegetable garden, it's just amazing to watch. My wife is really good at taking care of the bees, honeybees and stuff, and so she plants a lot of those types of flowering plants around here. It is amazing to watch them do their thing because you can literally be this close and you don't bother them, they don't bother you. And just watch them work and look at what they produce and how all these things that God provides, herbs and like bees honey, like locally you get bees honey and you take a teaspoon of that a day, it helps immensely with your allergies. Trust me, I speak from experience. All these things that God provides to help, to feed, to sustain us. And he does so because he loves us. Even in our sin. Doesn't like the sin, wrecks the relationship between us and him, but he loves us. Why else would he have sent his son? Why else would a God that is all-powerful, that smart to be able to design all that you see around you, why else would that God, send his son and watch him die on the cross for the sins we committed? Why else would he do that if he didn't love us? And so, on the cloudy days and the days that seem dark and dreary, remember that. And ask God to show you what he needs you to see. Because he's taking you through things for a reason. To grow you, to nurture you, to increase your faith, increase your trust in him. Whatever it is that you may need, he knows, and he will do things in your life to provide for those things, to grow those things in you so that you draw closer to him. He wants you to know him like Moses and Abraham did. That in and of itself is enough to be really, really thankful for.